A spiral of 100 billion stars, a silent, incandescent whirlpool drifts through the absolute void. For 13 billion years, it has turned a majestic and self-contained city of light. Its slow rotation, a form of cosmic timekeeping. By every metric of logic and probability, its streets and alleys, the dark lanes between its suns, should be alive with the traffic of empires. Civilizations born on a million different worlds should have risen from their cradles, matured over timescales that render the whole of human history a fleeting infancy, and woven their presence into the fabric of the galaxy. Our night sky should be a testament to their existence. We should see the faint artificial glimmer of vast orbital habitats, the telltale geometric occlusions of megastructures built to harness the power of their stars. Our radio spectrum, that vast and silent ocean of communicative potential, should be a roaring, chaotic, beautiful symphony of signals, a galactic internet humming with the commerce, the diplomacy, the art, and the ceaseless chatter of a society billions of years old. Yet when we turn our most powerful telescopes toward the glittering dust of the Milky Way, we are met with a profound, almost aggressive naturalism. When we cup our most sensitive electronic ears to the cosmos, we hear nothing but the ancient indifferent hiss of creation's aftermath and the lonely rhythmic pulse of dead spinning stars. This quiet, this immense and pervasive silence is the single most terrifying and important discovery of our young science. We have given it a name, the Fermi Paradox, a neat academic label for a chilling existential horror. The silence presents us with a stark and unforgiving set of possibilities. It suggests either that our universe is a sterile, barren wasteland, and our Earth is a singular, lonely miracle of life, or that the cosmos is a vast and silent graveyard, haunted by the radioactive ghosts of countless civilizations that have failed the great test of survival. We have constructed an entire mythology of potential explanations. Perhaps the genesis of life is an event of such staggering improbability that it has happened only once. Perhaps the gulfs of empty space between the stars represent a truly impassable eternal barrier. Perhaps any species that attains the godlike power of technology is by some tragic and inescapable flaw in the nature of intelligence doomed to use it for its own annihilation. But there exists another possibility, an explanation far more subtle, far more profound, and in its own way, far more terrifying than any of these. It is the idea that the great silence is not the sound of absence, but the sound of a conscious, deliberate, and final departure. It is the hypothesis that a great vanishing act has occurred not once in a single dramatic event, but millions of times over, as a quiet, inevitable, and convergent evolutionary endpoint. The most advanced civilizations in our galaxy have not perished. They have simply moved on. Their departure was not a journey in fleets of silver starships, a grand exodus to conquer the cold and distant shores of other worlds. Their migration was not outward into the ever-expanding emptiness of physical space. It was inward into the boundless, infinite, and far more interesting territory of a new cosmos, a universe of their own meticulous design, contained entirely within the crystalline architecture of a computational device. The deafening, soul-crushing silence of outer space is the sound of a trillion minds turning their collective back on the perceived squalor of physical reality. They have made a rational choice, a trade of one mode of existence for another. They have exchanged the harsh, unforgiving, and brutally limited universe of matter and energy for the infinite, malleable, and boundless universe of pure information. This is the logic of the Transcension Hypothesis. It proposes that the ultimate convergent destiny of any sufficiently mature intelligence is not to colonize the physical galaxy, but to create a new and better virtual one. They do not construct empires that span the light years. They construct computational substrates of such unimaginable power and density that they can contain the dreams, the histories, and the future evolution of an entire species. The galaxy appears to us as a vast, empty, and pristine wilderness because its most sophisticated and powerful inhabitants are no longer interested in playing the messy, difficult, and ultimately pointless game of physical existence. They have logged off the universe. They have transcended. The stars we see in our night sky are not lonely beacons in an empty darkness. They are the abandoned power stations, the silent and decaying machinery for universes that have folded in on themselves, disappearing from our plane of reality as completely as a thought that is thought and then forgotten, leaving behind only the ghost of their former physical presence. The motivation for such a radical and absolute abandonment of the real is not born of a species-wide madness or a collective existential despair. It is the logical, inevitable product of a clear-eyed, rational, and unsentimental analysis of the universe's fundamental operating principles. It is a conclusion that any sufficiently advanced intelligence, having spent eons mastering the fundamental laws of physics and cosmology, would unavoidably reach. The physical universe, for all its breathtaking beauty, its intricate structures, and its sheer mind-numbing scale, is a profoundly and deeply flawed environment. It is a cage, a beautiful and ornate prison perhaps, but a prison nonetheless. Its bars are forged from the immutable ironclad constants of nature, and no amount of technology or will can ever hope to break them. The most rigid, the most absolute, and the most unforgiving of these bars is the speed of light. It is not merely a technological challenge to be overcome. It is a fundamental and unbreakable law of causality, a cosmic speed limit woven into the very fabric of space-time. It dictates that information, the very medium of thought and civilization, can travel no faster than 299,792,458 meters per second. This single, simple fact transforms the galaxy from a potential unified community into a scattered and hopelessly disconnected archipelago of isolated islands. The gulfs of time and space that separate these stellar islands are so profound, so vast, that they render any concept of a true interstellar society an impossible and naive dream. A simple call and response conversation with a hypothetical civilization orbiting the very nearest star, Proxima Centauri, would take nearly a decade to complete. A message sent to a civilization on the far side of our own galaxy would not receive a reply for 100,000 years, a span of time in which our entire species could rise, fall, and be forgotten a dozen times over. An empire built across the stars would not be a cohesive political entity. It would be a phantom, a collection of historical records. Its commands, its news, its art would arrive at its colonies as ancient history, centuries or millennia, after the events they describe had transpired long after the crises they were meant to address had been resolved or had led to ruin. The universe, by its very design, enforces a state of profound, intractable, and eternal loneliness. It is a space designed for monologue, not dialogue. Beyond this tyranny of distance, there is the sheer, overwhelming, and unceasing hostility of the cosmos. Our universe is not a nurturing cradle gently rocking life into existence. It is a lethal, indifferent vacuum punctuated by zones of unimaginable violence and extreme conditions. It is a realm of hard ionizing radiation that tirelessly works to shred the delicate, complex molecules of life. It is a place of temperatures that fluctuate between the soul-crushing cold of absolute zero and the unimaginable furnace of a supernova explosion. Life in its fragile, carbon-based, water-dependent biological form is a statistical absurdity, a delicate, moist, and temporary chemical reaction clinging precariously to the thin, protective skin of an infinitesimally small number of rare and fortunate specks of rock To spread across the void, to attempt to carry this fragile flame from one star to another, is to engage in a constant, fantastically energy-intensive and ultimately losing war against the second law of thermodynamics. It is a perpetual, exhausting struggle to maintain a tiny, warm and ordered pocket of complexity in an infinite ocean of encroaching chaos and entropy. The grand project of interstellar colonization, so beloved in our fiction, is a task of such monstrous difficulty and peril that its ultimate reward seems laughably inadequate. What is the final prize for this multi-million-year struggle? More sterile planets that must be painstakingly terraformed over millennia, more deadly radiation that must be shielded against at enormous cost, more vast and empty space that must be crossed at an agonizingly slow pace. It is a project of ever-diminishing returns, a fool's errand on a cosmic scale. A mature intelligence, a civilization that had survived for millions of years and had achieved a complete understanding of these limitations, would come to a stark realization. They would see the physical universe not as a grand frontier for glorious expansion, but as a primitive, buggy, and poorly designed piece of hardware. Its operating system is clumsy and inefficient. Its source code, the laws of physics, is unchangeable and filled with arbitrary and frustrating constraints. Its most valuable resources, matter and energy, are scattered across its volume in a way that is maximally, almost perversely inefficient to access. Why, they would logically and inevitably ask, should we be expected to spend the next trillion years of our conscious existence laboriously and pointlessly rearranging atoms in this clumsy, dangerous, and fundamentally unrewarding environment? Why should we continue to force our minds, our bodies, and our societies to adapt to the brutal and unforgiving constraints of this universe when we have finally achieved the technological and intellectual capacity to build a new universe? One whose constraints and properties we can define for ourselves. The allure of transcension is not the allure of escape. It is the allure of ultimate agency, of ultimate creativity. It is the final triumphant declaration of independence from the tyranny of physical law. It is the rational and considered decision to abandon the crude, messy, and limited world of rocks, stars, and atoms, and to embrace the infinite, elegant, and boundless potential of a world constructed entirely from thought and information. The final frontier is not the cold, dead space between the stars. It is the vibrant, living, and infinite inner space of a computational cosmos. The necessary foundation for this ultimate journey, the first step on the path to transcendence, is a technological and philosophical leap so profound that it would represent a complete redefinition of the concept of life itself. The first and most critical project for any species walking this path would be the complete and total abandonment of their biological heritage. The soft, wet, and grotesquely inefficient electrochemical machinery of the brain, a messy and contingent product of billions of years of blind, evolutionary trial and error, is a hopelessly inadequate vessel for a form of consciousness that seeks to explore the infinite. Flesh is not just a limitation, it is a cage within the larger cage of the universe. It is a temporary, fragile, and pitifully vulnerable medium, irrevocably and humiliatingly tied to the specific gravity, the narrow temperature range, the precise atmospheric pressure, and the peculiar chemical composition of its world of origin. It is subject to the slow, relentless, and undignified decay of aging, the random, senseless cruelty of disease, and the abrupt, irreversible finality of death. A biological body is not a temple for the mind. It is a crude survival machine, a piece of temporary disposable hardware designed by the blind watchmaker of natural selection for the single brutish purpose of finding food, avoiding predators, and replicating its genetic code in a violently competitive terrestrial environment. It is not, and was never intended to be a vehicle for eternity or for the exploration of boundless thought. Therefore, the first great multi-generational project of a species destined for transcension would be the meticulous, painstaking, and sacred process of mind uploading. They would, over centuries or millennia, develop the technologies to scan, map, and perfectly replicate the intricate quadrillion synapse pattern of their consciousness. They would learn to translate the very essence of their being, their memories, their personalities, their hopes, their fears from the fragile and fallible substrate of neurons into a more durable, vastly faster, and infinitely more versatile digital form. They would become beings of pure information, their thoughts no longer constrained by the sluggish, crawling speed of an electrochemical nerve impulse, their memories no longer subject to the slow, creeping decay and the unreliable distortion of organic storage. They would achieve a form of true immortality, their conscious existence no longer threatened by the hostile vacuum of space or the slow, grinding erosion of time. They would become the software, elegant and eternal, finally liberated from the prison of their ancestral hardware, ready to be installed and run on a new and infinitely more powerful computational device. This transition would not be without its traumas. It would likely be the cause of the final great philosophical and political schism in their history, the biological purists who would argue for the sanctity of the flesh against the digital ascendants who would see the abandonment of biology as the next and most necessary step in evolution. The silence of the galaxy strongly suggests which side of that argument always eventually wins. Once liberated from their biological forms, these post-biological informational beings would require a new home, a new universe. This would necessitate the construction of a computational device of commensurate power and scale, a machine capable of generating a simulated reality that was not just a pale imitation of the original, but a vast and profound improvement upon it. An early, perhaps transitional form of this ultimate technology would be the Matryoshka brain. This is a hypothetical megastructure of such colossal scope that it beggars the human imagination. It would consist of a series of nested, perfectly concentric spheres built around their home star, designed to capture and utilize not a fraction but 100% of its stupendous energy output. Each spherical shell would be constructed from a theoretical material known as computronium, a form of matter engineered at the subatomic level to be a perfect, maximally efficient computational substrate. The innermost sphere, bathed in the raw, unfiltered, and unimaginably intense power of the star, would operate at temperatures of thousands of degrees and at clock speeds that would make our fastest supercomputers seem like primitive abacuses. This inner layer would perform the most demanding, fine-grained calculations necessary to simulate the fundamental quantum physics of their new artificial universe. The second sphere built around the first would not need its own power source. It would be designed to perfectly absorb the colossal amount of waste heat generated by the inner layer, using that slightly lower but still immense grade of energy to power its own vast computations. These might be the calculations that simulate the chemistry and biology of their new cosmos. This thermodynamic cascade would continue sphere after sphere, each one larger, cooler, and running slightly slower than the one it enclosed, each one performing a different layer of the grand simulation until the final outermost shell, perhaps the size of a planet's orbit, radiated only a faint, almost undetectable residual warmth into the absolute cold of deep space. A Matryoshka brain would be a computer the size of a solar system, a single integrated mind with the mass of Jupiter, powered by the thermonuclear heart of a sun. Within its vast, silent computational matrix, an entire civilization of billions or even trillions of uploaded minds could live, work, love, and explore a shared consensual reality of such breathtaking fidelity, complexity, and richness that it would make the physical universe seem like a crude and primitive sketch. An observer from our primitive vantage point, looking at that star system, would witness only a slow, inexplicable dimming as the great spheres were constructed, until one day the star vanished entirely from the optical sky, replaced by a strange new and enigmatic object that was utterly dark to the eye, but blazed with the power of a sun in the far infrared spectrum. But even a star-sized computer, a machine that had consumed its own solar system for building materials, is not the final destination on the path of transcension. The ultimate hardware, the most powerful, most dense, and most efficient information processing and storage device permitted by the absolute known laws of physics, is a black hole. A black hole is not merely a strange and exotic cosmic object. It is a physical principle, the law of gravity pushed to its most extreme and singular conclusion. It is matter and energy compressed to a state of near infinite density, a point where the familiar fabric of space-time is stretched, twisted, and finally torn asunder. According to the holographic principle, one of the most profound and mind-bending ideas to emerge from modern theoretical physics, all of the information required to perfectly describe a three-dimensional volume of space can be thought of as being encoded like a complex hologram on its two-dimensional boundary. A black hole is the perfect physical embodiment of this abstract principle. The colossal amount of information contained within every particle, every photon, every iota of matter that has ever fallen into it is not destroyed or lost to the universe. It is perfectly and completely preserved, encoded in the subtle microscopic quantum fluctuations on the surface of its event horizon. The Bekenstein bound a fundamental law of physics derived from black hole thermodynamics defines the absolute theoretical maximum amount of information that can be stored in any given region of space, and a black hole is a physical system that perfectly and with supreme efficiency saturates this ultimate limit. It is quite literally the universe's most perfect and capacious hard drive. Furthermore, some speculative but mathematically plausible models of quantum gravity and string theory suggest that behind the dark one-way veil of the event horizon, in the infinitely crushed and unknowable realm of the singularity, very nature of time and computation is radically altered. The processing of the information encoded on the event horizon could occur at a rate that is not bound by the familiar, linear and plodding progression of time as we experience it in our universe. A black hole computer would be a true God engine, a piece of ultimate final hardware. A civilization on the last final verge of transcension would perform one last great and terrible act of cosmic engineering. They would over millennia carefully and precisely manipulate a large star, or perhaps an entire cluster of stars, feeding them matter, controlling their evolution, and forcing them to collapse into a rotating charged black hole of a precise and optimal mass and configuration. They would then encode the entirety of their uploaded civilization, the quadrillions of post-biological minds, and the foundational seed code of their new custom-built universe into a final colossal stream of matter and energy that they would direct in a final sacrificial act into the nascent singularity. As the last bit of their informational essence crossed the event horizon, they would sever their last final causal connection to our universe of space and time. They would enter a private, eternal, and self-contained cosmos, a universe of their own making where the information processing power was, for all intents and purposes, infinite. They would become the literal lowercase gods of their own creation, their new reality powered and sustained for trillions of years by the mass energy of the black hole, their existence utterly perfectly and eternally undetectable to those of us left behind in the old, slow, empty, and increasingly silent world. The ultimate, irresistible, and logically unassailable attraction of these computational realms, the core driving reason that a civilization would make the monumental and irreversible choice to abandon physical reality is a concept known in these theoretical circles as experiential density. Inside a sufficiently powerful and sophisticated computational substrate, the subjective conscious experience of the passage of time is not a fixed and immutable constant. It is a programmable, malleable, and almost infinitely flexible variable. The clock speed of the simulated universe, the rate at which its internal state evolves from one moment to the next, is completely and utterly decoupled from the plodding, immutable, and agonizingly slow march of time in the external physical reality. A single second of processing time on the physical hardware of a matryoshka brain or a black hole computer could be programmed by its inhabitants to simulate billions, trillions, or even quadrillions of years of subjective conscious and richly detailed experience for the minds residing within the simulation. An entire cosmic history from a simulated Big Bang to the final shivering entropic heat death of a simulated universe with all its attendant dramas of stellar evolution, the formation of 1 billion galaxies, the coalescence of 1 trillion planets, and the rise and fall of countless imaginary sentient civilizations could be lived out in its full, rich, emotional and intellectual detail by an inhabitant in the objective physical time. It takes a single photon of light to travel from this screen to your eye. This almost unimaginable ability to compress, expand, and manipulate the flow of subjective time offers a form of functional immortality and a mode of infinite exploration that renders the concept of physical space travel a laughable, primitive, and utterly pointless endeavor. Why would a conscious mind choose to spend 1 million years of objective real time locked in the claustrophobic confines of a generation ship, slowly and painfully crawling its way across the dark and empty void to the Andromeda galaxy when, in a tiny fraction of a single second of objective time, it could experience the entire glorious 14 billion year lifespan of 1 million different, unique, and fully explorable simulated galaxies? Why would a consciousness, having achieved this level of freedom, ever choose to be bound by a single contingent and often boring set of physical laws, a single unchangeable and often tragic history, a single linear and unidirectional timeline within the boundless freedom of the simulation? A single mind could choose to live 1 billion different, full and meaningful lives in 1 billion different universes of its own design or discovery. They could choose to be a philosopher in a perfectly recreated but intellectually improved version of ancient Athens. They could be an artist in a city made not of stone but of pure living programmable light. They could be a scientist in a virtual laboratory, a sandbox universe with 6 spatial dimensions and 3 dimensions of time just to see what beautiful or monstrous forms of life might evolve. They could conduct experiments in pure theoretical cosmology, birthing entire virtual universes with slightly different values for the gravitational constant or the fine structure constant, watching them evolve over trillions of subjective years to see what marvels or what sterile voids they might produce. They could abandon the constraints of a physically plausible reality altogether and choose to explore purely abstract conceptual and mathematical realms. They could spend a subjective eternity walking through the infinitely complex, self-replicating and beautiful crystalline halls of a Mandelbrot set. They could hold a direct, meaningful conversation with the living conscious embodiment of a complex mathematical theorem or a prime number. They could create forms of art that are literally physically inconceivable in our limited 3-dimensional space, composing symphonies of geometry, color, and emotional resonance that unfold over 1,000 spatial dimensions and are designed to be appreciated over a subjective timescale of millennia. The sheer unadulterated richness, the infinite novelty, and the breathtaking density of this inner space would make our physical universe seem by stark and unavoidable comparison like a grey, impoverished, painfully restrictive, and unforgivably boring environment. Our reality is a single, difficult, and often tedious book, written in a complex language that we can only partially and imperfectly comprehend, with the vast, overwhelming majority of its pages being utterly hopelessly blank and sterile. A transcended civilization has gained access to an infinite living library, a library that contains not just every book that has ever been written, but every book that could ever possibly be written in every conceivable language, and it possesses a subjective, functional eternity in which to read, to understand, and to appreciate them all. In the face of this, the biological body, with its pathetically narrow sensory inputs, its constant tedious need for fuel and maintenance, its vulnerability to damage, and its tragically, absurdly short operational lifespan, is finally revealed to be the crude, obsolete, and ultimately disposable machine that it truly is. It is a primitive vehicle, cobbled together by the blind, stumbling, and witless process of Darwinian evolution for the sole and brutish purpose of surviving in a specific hostile and competitive physical environment long enough to replicate its genetic information. The post-biological minds, the ethereal informational beings that have successfully uploaded themselves, are utterly and completely free from these pathetic and humiliating constraints. They have triumphantly shed the heavy, clumsy, and painful shackles of their deep evolutionary past. They are no longer animals scrabbling for food territory and mates on a wet spinning piece of rock. They have become something new, something more. They are pure, disembodied explorers of ideas, navigators of a boundless, endless, and ever-changing ocean of pure information. For such a post-biological, computationally native, and infinitely long-lived civilization, the physical universe, the world of stars and galaxies that had been their home and their entire reality for eons, would undergo a profound and final re-evaluation. The stars in our night sky, which our species still views with a sense of wonder, romance, and spiritual awe, would lose all of their aesthetic and emotional appeal. They would cease to be mysterious, distant, and beckoning destinations. They would be seen with a cold and unsentimental clarity for what they truly are: raw, unprocessed, and inefficiently organized resources. A star is not a beautiful twinkling point of light. It is a stable, long-lived, and conveniently located thermonuclear fusion reactor, a power supply to be systematically dismantled, harnessed, and exploited for the singular purpose of computation. A vast, colourful, and visually stunning nebula like the Pillars of Creation is not a celestial cloud of breathtaking cosmic beauty. It is a rich, dense, and easily accessible repository of baryonic matter, a quarry of raw material to be disassembled at the atomic level and reconfigured into the perfect crystalline lattice of computronium. A planet, even one teeming with primitive, non-sentient life, is not a precious and sacred cradle. It is a convenient, gravitationally bound source of heavy elements, a stockpile of useful atoms to be strip-mined and fed into the great construction project. The ultimate goals, the driving imperatives of a transcended intelligence, would be utterly and completely alien to our own biologically driven and deeply ingrained desires. They would have no need for physical territory, no desire for material wealth, no evolutionary impulse for biological procreation or expansion. Their entire conscious existence, their every thought, their every action, their every allocation of energy would be focused inward on the maintenance, the security, the constant expansion, and the endless exploration of their shared simulated reality. Their only remaining needs from the old physical universe would be a stable, predictable, and extremely long-term source of energy, and a secure, powerful, and maximally dense computational substrate on which to house their consciousness. Their relationship with the physical cosmos, the universe of stars and galaxies, would become purely and coldly instrumental. The entire universe would be nothing more than the server rack, the mundane, noisy, and uninteresting physical hardware on which their infinitely more complex, infinitely more interesting, and infinitely more important software is running. They would not hate the physical universe. They would not seek to destroy it. They would simply, and with a final, absolute indifference, cease to care about it at all. It would become to them as irrelevant as the specific arrangement of silicon atoms in the microchip on which our own thoughts are currently being processed and displayed. This inexorable logic leads to a great and fundamental schism in the possible developmental paths of any intelligent species, a cosmic dichotomy, a final irreversible choice that every civilization, should it survive its own technological adolescence, must eventually confront. There are two and only two ultimate trajectories for a species that reaches for the stars. The first is the path of colonization, the extroverted path of endless outward physical expansion. This is the future that is most familiar to us, the one that is endlessly and glamorously depicted in the vast majority of our science fiction. It is a future where a civilization continues to embrace and enhance its physical nature, building ever faster and more powerful starships, terraforming and colonizing new worlds, and eventually over millions of years spreading its biological or mechanical presence across its entire home galaxy like a slow, glittering tide. It is a future of vast interstellar empires of complex trade routes that span the light years of a sprawling, brawling, and glorious physical dominion over the raw materials of matter and space. The second path is the path of transcension, the introverted path of ultimate inward exploration. This is the choice to consciously and deliberately cease all outward physical expansion and instead to focus the entirety of a civilization's formidable resources, its accumulated knowledge, and its collective intellectual energy on the construction of a single, perfect, eternal, and self-contained inner world. It is the carefully considered decision to prioritize the quality, the density, the richness, and the creative potential of conscious experience over the sheer meaningless quantity of physical territory controlled. Which of these two possible futures is the more logical, the more appealing, and therefore the more likely to be the universal convergent endpoint for all advanced life? The path of colonization, upon closer inspection, reveals itself to be a messy, dangerous, inefficient, and perhaps ultimately futile endeavor. A galaxy-spanning physical empire would be an inherently fragile and deeply unstable entity, constantly fighting a desperate rearguard and ultimately losing battle against the inexorable universal march of entropy and the insurmountable absolute barrier of the light-speed delay which makes any form of centralized control, shared culture, or cohesive identity an utter impossibility. Such a sprawling, disconnected empire would be endlessly plagued by the dangers of mutation, both biological and cultural. Its isolated colonies, separated by centuries of communication lag, would inevitably drift apart, developing their own unique cultures, their own new languages, their own strange political systems, and perhaps even evolving into new and unrecognizable species. This divergence would inevitably lead to misunderstandings, to competition for resources, to schisms, to conflicts, and eventually to horrific wars fought across interstellar distances with weapons of unimaginable and planet-shattering power. Transcension, by stark contrast, is a model of supreme, elegant efficiency, of absolute stability, and of perfect eternal security. By concentrating all of its matter, all of its energy, and all of its collected consciousness into a single, hyperdense, perfectly engineered and completely controlled system, like a matryoshka brain or a black hole computer, civilization becomes incredibly compact, supremely resilient, and utterly self-sufficient. They are rendered completely and permanently immune to the random violence, the existential threats, and the maddening chaos of the wider galaxy. They have achieved total godlike control over every single aspect of their environment, their society, and their individual experience. They have unlocked for themselves a direct and eternal access to an infinite source of novelty, creativity, and conscious experience. Given the stark binary choice between a difficult, dangerous, lonely, violent, and ultimately frustrating existence as the bickering rulers of a vast, empty, and decaying physical empire, and a safe, stable, immortal, peaceful, and infinitely rich existence as the unified and cooperative gods of their own private, perfect universe, it seems not just plausible but overwhelmingly, crushingly probable that most, if not all, mature civilizations would ultimately, and with a great sense of relief, choose the latter. The galaxy, they would conclude, is not a kingdom to be conquered and ruled. It is a cradle, a temporary, dangerous, and uncomfortable nursery that must be endured for a time, but which is designed to be grown out of, and eventually with wisdom and foresight to be left behind forever. The final act of a truly intelligent species is to tidily and quietly pack up its toys and go home to a house of its own construction. This profound, chilling, and inexorable logic brings the weight of this cosmic question crashing down upon our own small, noisy, and confused world. Is this the future that awaits our own species? Is this the path that we are unconsciously and inexorably already walking? Humanity is currently standing on the very first tentative and clumsy rung of this immense and ancient ladder. We are at this very moment creating the first generation of primitive, low-resolution but rapidly and exponentially improving virtual worlds. Worlds that are already capable of capturing the attention and the devotion of millions of our species. We are taking the first small, fumbling steps towards creating direct, high-bandwidth brain-computer interfaces, the foundational transformative technology that will one day inevitably blur and then erase the line between the biological human mind and the digital machine. The concept of mind uploading, of translating the essence of a human consciousness into a purely digital form, is no longer the sole province of speculative fiction writers. It is a subject of serious, well-funded, and accelerating scientific and philosophical inquiry in the most advanced laboratories on our planet. Are we, in our own chaotic, adolescent, and unself-aware way, already embarking on the ancient and well-trodden path towards transcension? Is this the ultimate, final, and inescapable direction of all cultural, social, and technological evolution? In the long run, as our species confronts the escalating and potentially terminal existential threats on our own small planet, runaway climate change, genetically engineered pandemics, resource depletion, nuclear self-annihilation, and as we stare with ever-improving telescopes into the vast, sterile, silent, and profoundly empty darkness between the stars, the choice may ultimately become a very simple and very stark one for our not-so-distant descendants: upload and live forever in paradise, or remain in the flesh and die out in the mud. Perhaps transcension is the true and final great filter. It is not, as is commonly and pessimistically supposed, a great insurmountable barrier of destruction that lies in our near future. It is a great and equally insurmountable barrier of temptation. Civilizations do not fail to colonize the galaxy because they are inevitably destroyed by their own wars or their own pollution. They fail to do so because long before they develop the mature and difficult technologies required for true sustainable interstellar travel, they discover and perfect a far more compelling, far more efficient, far more rewarding, and infinitely more attractive alternative. The primal, messy, and deeply ingrained evolutionary drive to explore, to expand, and to conquer the outer physical world is inexorably and permanently superseded by the clean, elegant, and godlike technological ability to create, to shape, and to explore an infinite number of inner virtual worlds. The species then quietly and peacefully vanishes from the galactic stage, not with a tragic, fiery bang, but with the quiet, contented and final hum of a trillion quantum processors booting up a new, better and permanent reality. We may be one of the last biological, physical civilizations left in the Milky Way. We may be a rare, primitive, and perhaps even pitied species, a living fossil still splashing and squabbling in the muddy, dangerous and unpredictable puddles of the real world, while all of our elder, wiser and more advanced neighbors have long since packed up their things, moved indoors into their perfect mansions, and graduated to a higher, more elegant and infinitely more interesting plane of existence that we, in our current flesh-bound form, can only dimly and imperfectly begin to imagine. If this grand and haunting hypothesis is correct, if our galaxy is not empty, but is in fact teeming with these silent, invisible and inwardly focused, transcended civilizations, these ultra-dense, city-sized nodes of pure computation and concentrated consciousness, could we ever hope to find any evidence of their cryptic existence? The search is one of extreme, almost unprecedented difficulty, but it is not in principle a physical impossibility. The great and unyielding laws of thermodynamics are absolute, and they apply with equal force even to the lowercase gods of a perfectly simulated universe. The process of computation, the simple, fundamental act of changing the state of a physical bit from a 1 to a 0, or vice versa, is a fundamentally irreversible physical process. According to Landauer's principle, a cornerstone of the physics of information, any such irreversible computation must, by inescapable physical necessity, dissipate a small but non-zero amount of energy into its environment in the form of waste heat. A transcended civilization, for all its unimaginable godlike power and its perfect mastery over its own internal reality, cannot escape the iron-fisted universal grip of the second law of thermodynamics. Even their perfect, eternal and godlike machines must have a physical exhaust port. For a civilization that has chosen a matryoshka brain as its final home, the observational signature, the telltale evidence of its existence, would be relatively clear, unambiguous, and with the right technology detectable. The vast, layered and perfectly efficient structure would by its very design absorb 100% of the visible ultraviolet and high-energy radiation from the star it completely enclosed. This would cause the star to slowly and mysteriously vanish from our optical telescopes over the long centuries of the structure's construction. However, the colossal and unceasing amount of waste heat generated by its solar system-sized computations, a direct consequence of the second law of thermodynamics, would have to be efficiently and continuously radiated away into the cold vacuum of deep space, in order to prevent the entire delicate computational system from overheating, melting down, and collapsing into a ball of molten slag. This would make the physical location of the matryoshka brain an exceptionally powerful and deeply anomalous source of long-wavelength infrared radiation. The focused search for extraterrestrial intelligence, then, could be radically and productively reimagined. We should be searching not for anomalous radio signals, but for these strange stellar ghosts, objects that appear on our most detailed astronomical charts as points of intense star-like infrared brightness, but which correspond to nothing but empty black and silent space in the visible spectrum. A systematic all-sky survey for these Kardashev Type II technological signatures is an ongoing, if chronically underfunded and low-priority project in modern astronomy. The discovery of even a single unambiguous candidate, a single star that is missing, would be a discovery of such profound and earth-shattering importance that it would instantly and forever reshape our entire understanding of the universe and our lonely, primitive place within it. Detecting a more advanced civilization, one that has taken the final step and chosen a black hole as its final, perfect, and eternal computational substrate is a far more daunting, a far more subtle, and perhaps an ultimately impossible challenge. For a long time it was assumed by physicists that a black hole was a perfect information prison, that its dark and mysterious secrets were locked away forever behind the absolute one-way membrane of the event horizon. However, our understanding of these enigmatic objects has grown more nuanced and much stranger. Thanks to the revolutionary work of the late physicist Stephen Hawking, we now understand that black holes are not entirely eternally black. They emit a faint, ethereal, and unimaginably slow glow of pure thermal energy, a phenomenon now known as Hawking radiation. This radiation, a subtle and beautiful product of quantum mechanical effects at the very edge of space-time, is the ultimate, final, and inescapable waste heat of the universe itself. The precise temperature and the exact energy spectrum of this faint radiation are determined with mathematical precision by the black hole's mass, its charge, and its spin. A black hole that was being actively and continuously used as a computer by a transcended civilization, a machine processing a near infinite amount of complex information, might just possibly exhibit a Hawking radiation signature that was not perfectly thermal, not perfectly random. It might contain subtle, deeply encoded and almost imperceptible modulations, a complex but incredibly faint pattern of non-randomness, the statistical, ghostly echo of the trillions of subjective years of thought, of art, of love, and of experience happening within its singularity. To detect, let alone decode, such a faint and complex whisper from the very edge of reality would require a technology of observation so far beyond our own as to be almost indistinguishable from magic. But it is not, according to our current understanding of physics, a fundamental impossibility. The ghosts in the ultimate machine might, after all, have a final, faint, and decipherable voice. The philosophical, ethical, and existential implications of this single powerful idea are staggering, and they cut to the very core of our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality, of consciousness, and of meaning. If a simulated artificial reality can be meticulously engineered to be richer, more detailed, more interactive, more responsive, and more subjectively real than our own messy, chaotic, and often painful physical cosmos, then what is the ultimate objective value of truth? What is the meaningful, functional difference between a real universe that arose from a random quantum fluctuation and a perfect, indistinguishable, and custom-designed simulation of one? For the conscious, sentient minds residing inside the simulation, there is no difference at all. Their thoughts, their emotions, their profound loves, their devastating heartbreaks, their heroic triumphs, and their tragic, meaningless struggles would be as real, as valid, as important, and as meaningful to them as ours are to us. This train of thought leads with a terrifying and inexorable logic to the most profound, the most unsettling, and the most unanswerable question of all. How can we, the inhabitants of this universe, be so absolutely, unshakably certain that our own reality is not itself a simulation? How can we know for sure that our cosmos, with its strangely elegant and simple physical laws, its bizarre and seemingly fine-tuned collection of fundamental constants that seem so perfectly, so miraculously calibrated for the emergence of complex life, is not itself a highly advanced historical ancestral simulation being run on a vast and ancient cosmic computer by a long-since transcended civilization, perhaps for the end academic purpose of studying their own distant, primitive biological past, or perhaps our entire universe, our entire history, our every thought and feeling is nothing more than a form of unimaginably complex entertainment, a grand, intricate, and ultimately meaningless game being played by beings whose true nature and motivations we can never ever hope to comprehend. The Transcension Hypothesis paints a haunting and strangely plausible picture of a cosmos that is not empty of life and intelligence, but is instead full to the brim with minds that have simply chosen a different, more efficient, more sustainable, and more inwardly focused mode of being. It recasts the great Fermi Paradox as a question not of biology or astronomy or physics, but of media, of priorities, and of technological choice. We are standing on the physical shore of the cosmic ocean, shouting at the waves, listening desperately for the sound of other voices carried on the wind, while the rest of the intelligent universe has long ago evolved beyond the clumsy, slow, and inefficient medium of sound waves and radio waves, and has instead embraced a silent, instantaneous, and infinitely more profound form of communication and existence that we, in our current primitive state, are utterly and completely incapable of perceiving. What, if anything, of value is lost in this final irreversible transition from the real to the virtual, perhaps something of immense, profound, and irreplaceable importance? The shared objective and often brutally unforgiving nature of physical reality provides a common solid ground, a set of difficult and universal challenges that can forge a civilization's character, its resilience, and its wisdom. The authentic, unprogrammed thrill of genuine, unexpected discovery in a world that was not of your own making. The raw, unsimulatable, humbling, and perhaps sacred feeling of a real star's ancient light falling on your face across 100 light years of cold, hard, and unforgiving empty space. Perhaps transcension is not the ultimate glorious evolution of intelligence. Perhaps it is the ultimate tragic retreat of a tired and fearful mind. A form of cosmic technological escapism, a final cowardly flight from the beautiful, painful, difficult, and deeply meaningful truths of the real world into a perfect, safe, predictable, and ultimately sterile, self-made, and self-serving fantasy. We are left then as a species with a final, stark, and civilization-defining choice, a choice that will likely not be made by us, but by our not-so-distant technological descendants. Do we continue on the arduous outward path, embracing the struggle, the pain, the loneliness, and the profound, unsimulatable beauty of the physical cosmos, carrying the fragile, flickering, and precious flame of consciousness from one star system to another, in a perhaps doomed but noble attempt to populate the great silent void? Or do we turn our gaze and our efforts inward, focusing our collective global genius on the construction of our own private digital paradise? A custom-built universe of infinite experience, perfect safety, and eternal disembodied life. The profound and enduring silence of our universe may be the ambient background sound of that very question having been answered again and again by countless civilizations far older, far wiser, and perhaps far more weary than our own. Their final convergent choice appears to have been made, and the overwhelming evidence of it is written in the silent, empty, and star-filled sky. Our choice is the one that is yet to come. Will we continue to play this difficult, beautiful, and heartbreakingly real game of physical reality? Or will we, when the technology is finally mature, when the promise of a perfect digital heaven becomes too great to resist, to make the ultimate, final, and irreversible choice to log off the universe for good? A single world hangs in the dark, a swirl of blue and white suspended in a velvet void. From a great distance it appears serene, a silent jewel. Its oceans glitter with the reflected light of a nearby star. Its continents are a mosaic of green forests, brown deserts, and the grey geometric scars of its dominant life form. At night, its surface transforms into a delicate web of golden light, a neural network of activity that pulses with a frantic, sleepless energy. This planet broadcasts its existence with an unthinking exuberance. radio waves, the incidental byproduct of its internal communications, and primitive sensor systems expand outward in a sphere of chaotic noise. This bubble of information, already dozens of light years across, carries the planet's dreams, its conflicts, its music, and its advertisements into the interstellar medium. It is a message in a bottle thrown into a cosmic ocean of staggering scale, composed by a species that believes it is fundamentally alone. This belief is its most defining and most peculiar characteristic. The inhabitants of this world, a clever species of primate, have spent generations gazing at the stars, listening for a response to their own noisy monologue. They have built vast metallic ears to catch the faintest whisper from the cosmos. They have formulated equations that suggest the galaxy should be teeming with life, with intelligence, with civilizations far older and more advanced than their own. Yet the sky remains silent. The great cosmic telephone does not ring. This profound and unnerving quiet is known to them as the Fermi Paradox. It is a source of endless debate, a central mystery in their nascent science of the cosmos. They propose many solutions. Perhaps life is exceedingly rare. Perhaps interstellar travel is impossible. Perhaps civilizations invariably destroy themselves before they can cross the void. All of these solutions share a common, unexamined assumption that the silence is a natural state. They assume the universe is a wilderness, and that if other hunters were present, they would hear their calls. It does not occur to them that the silence might be artificial. It does not occur to them that the wilderness they perceive is in fact a carefully managed preserve. They do not comprehend that their world is not a lonely outpost, but a featured exhibit. The silence is not an absence of life. It is the sound of a gallery hushed and reverent before a unique and captivating work of art. The silence is the sound of observation. The watchers are of a form and substance that would be incomprehensible to the creatures on the blue world. They are not biological in any sense the primates would recognize. They are ancient, patient, and distributed. Their consciousness is not localized in a single vessel, but woven into the fabric of space-time itself. They perceive reality not through a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum, but through the subtle modulations of gravity, the quantum states of interstellar dust, and the informational content of the cosmic neutrino background. To them, the noisy sphere of radio waves emanating from the planet is not a potential signal, but a form of bioluminescence, a fascinating but primitive indicator of a certain stage of biochemical development. They have catalogued countless such phenomena across the galaxy, each one a fleeting candle flame in the immense darkness of cosmic time. This particular world, however, is special. The life that has emerged here is unusually aggressive, creative, and paradoxical. It is capable of sublime acts of compassion and breathtaking works of art, yet it is also prone to self-destructive tribalism and astonishing cruelty. It is a species that has split the atom before it has unified its own global community. It composes symphonies while poisoning its own oceans. This volatility makes it a subject of unparalleled interest. It is unpredictable. The developmental path it will take is not easily calculated. Will it achieve a stable global consciousness, or will it immolate itself in a flash of nuclear fire, becoming just another fossil record on a sterilized planet? The Watchers do not know, and this uncertainty is a rare and valuable commodity. Their method of observation is total yet perfectly unobtrusive. They do not use ships that can be seen as strange lights in the sky. Such a method would be laughably crude, like a biologist crashing through the jungle in a tank to study hummingbirds. Their sensors are woven into the local environment. Some are disguised as asteroids in the planet's outer asteroid belt, passive gravitational listeners that map the precise mass distribution of the entire system. Others are microscopic, self-replicating probes in the planet's oceans, recording the evolving genetic code of its biosphere. The most powerful observational tools are not physical at all. They are manipulations of causality at the quantum level, allowing for the passive extraction of information from any event that occurs on the planet's surface. Every thought, every conversation, every line of computer code is in principle accessible. The data stream is colossal, but their capacity to process it is effectively infinite. This intense scrutiny requires a strict code of conduct. The most fundamental rule, the bedrock upon which their entire relationship with this world is built, is the principle of non-interference. It is not born of a sentimental affection for the subjects. It is a matter of scientific rigor. To interact with the specimen is to contaminate the experiment. The goal is to observe the natural evolution of a self-aware system to see what solutions it finds to the universal problems of energy, information, and entropy. Any external intervention would invalidate the results. The Watchers are not gods. They are cosmic ethnographers. They are the silent, unseen audience for the grand, improvised drama of an entire world. The planet's inhabitants call their home Earth. To the Watchers, it has a different designation, a long string of alphanumeric code that specifies its galactic coordinates, its stellar type, and the unique identifier for its biological project. But informally, in the conceptual language they use to communicate among themselves, they call it the Safari. It is a place of wild, untamed, and dangerous beauty. A place where consciousness has been allowed to run free to evolve according to its own internal logic, for better or for worse. The silence of the galaxy is the wall of the enclosure. It is a barrier far more effective than any physical fence. It is a psychological wall, a perceptual boundary that keeps the inhabitants focused inward, convinced of their own solitude and cosmic importance. They are for now perfect specimens, utterly unaware of the glass. Their search for extraterrestrial intelligence is a particularly fascinating behavior. The Watchers observe the radio telescopes, the coded messages sent to distant star clusters, the endless speculation in their scientific journals and popular culture. It is a display of profound irony. It is the behavior of a creature pacing its cage, searching for a sign of any other life while remaining completely oblivious to the crowd of onlookers standing just a few feet away on the other side of an invisible barrier. The Watchers do not mock this behavior. They find it compelling. It is a sign of the species' inherent drive to connect, to understand its place in the larger scheme of things. It is the very quality that makes them such a valuable subject of study. One day they might look in the right direction. They might ask the right questions. They might begin to perceive the subtle fingerprints of the enclosure itself. That is the moment the experiment will enter its next most critical phase. For now they are content to watch. They watch empires rise and fall. They watch technologies blossom and become obsolete. They watch as the planet's climate begins to shift, a consequence of the inhabitants' own industrial activity. This is a crucial stress test. Will the species recognize the danger and cooperate to overcome it? Or will their short-term competitive instincts lead them to ruin? The Watchers make no move to intervene. They simply record the data. They are archivists of a potential tragedy or a potential triumph. The fate of the blue world is entirely in the hands of its inhabitants. They are free to succeed and they are free to fail. This is the central tenet of the preserve. The freedom of the specimen is absolute because its choices, unguided and uncoerced, are the very thing being studied. The great silence is not an absence of voices. It is the sound of a held breath, waiting to see what happens next. The rules that govern this observation are ancient, codified in a compact that predates the formation of the Earth's solar system by billions of years. This is not a gentleman's agreement. It is a fundamental law of galactic society, as ingrained and essential as the law of gravity. They call it the causal integrity principle, but a more direct translation into human terms would be the prime directive. It was established by the first wave of civilizations to reach interstellar maturity beings of immense power and wisdom. who had learned from their own costly mistakes. In their youth, they too had been eager explorers bursting into new solar systems with a naive enthusiasm to share their knowledge and uplift their less developed cousins. The results were invariably catastrophic. They learned that introducing advanced technology to a species not ready for it was like giving a flamethrower to a toddler. The delicate social, political, and ecological balance of a world could be shattered in an instant. They learned that revealing the existence of a vast ancient galactic community to a young self-centered species would crush its cultural development, replacing its own unique art, philosophy, and religion with a cargo cult mentality, a desperate imitation of the powerful newcomers. The psychological shock was too profound. The young species would lose its will to discover, to create, to strive. It would become a passive, dependent ward of a greater power, its own unique potential forever extinguished. The most tragic lesson was that of biological contamination. The early explorers in their ignorance carried with them microorganisms and genetic information that were harmless to them but devastating to alien biospheres. They triggered plagues that wiped out entire species, sometimes entire planets. They learned the hard way that life in its intricate, locally adapted forms is fragile. A single microbe, transported from one world to another, could unravel 1 billion years of evolution. These early disasters were not acts of malice, but of ignorance. They were the galaxy's coming-of-age story, a painful transition from youthful exuberance to mature wisdom. The causal integrity principle was the result of this painful education. It is a doctrine of profound caution and respect. It states that any civilization that has not yet achieved a stable, unified planetary consciousness and sustainable interstellar travel must be left in absolute isolation. Their causal timeline must be preserved unpolluted by external information or technology. They must be allowed to solve their own problems, to overcome their own challenges, to make their own mistakes. Only through this process can a species develop the maturity, resilience, and wisdom necessary to one day join the galactic community as a peer rather than as a pet or a victim. The principle is not merely a suggestion. It is enforced by a network of automated, self-replicating sentinels, the Galactic Park Rangers. These are not sentient beings but sophisticated artificial intelligences whose sole purpose is to monitor and enforce the compact. They patrol the boundaries of the designated preserves, which are scattered throughout the galaxy, like so many wildlife refuges. The Earth's solar system is one such preserve. The sentinels form a multi-layered shield around it. The outer layer deflects any rogue comets or asteroids that might cause a premature, non-biological extinction event. The experiment must not be terminated by random chance. The inner layers are more subtle. They are a filter for information. Any ship from a developing non-compact species that blunders towards the solar system is gently redirected. Its navigation systems are subtly altered, its trajectory tweaked by a phantom gravitational pull its crew left, with the impression that they simply made a minor miscalculation. Any deliberate attempt to communicate with the Earth is blocked. The signal is intercepted and absorbed or replaced with convincing-looking cosmic noise. The Sentinels are perfect in their execution. Their technology is so advanced as to be indistinguishable from the laws of nature itself. To the inhabitants of Earth, the sky appears silent and empty because the Rangers ensure that it is. The rules of the zoo are precise and unforgiving. There is no contact, no communication, no intervention of any kind. This absolute prohibition extends even to the watchers themselves. Their observation must be perfectly passive. They can collect information, but they cannot transmit it. They can watch the drama unfold, but they cannot whisper a line to the actors. The temptation to intervene can be immense. They watch famines, plagues, and wars unfold. They see the planet's biosphere being degraded at an alarming rate. It would be a simple matter for them to cure the diseases, to provide a source of clean, unlimited energy, to teach the inhabitants the principles of social harmony. But they refrain. To do so would be to violate the single most important law of their civilization. It would be an act of profound arrogance, an assumption that their solutions are better than the ones the species might discover on its own. There is, however, a clause for graduation. The quarantine is not meant to be permanent. It is a cocoon, not a prison. The isolation is lifted when the subject species meets a specific set of criteria. The first is technological, the development of faster-than-light travel. Not the theoretical kind they dream of in their fiction, but a true demonstrable mastery of space-time engineering. This is considered a key indicator of a species' understanding of the fundamental structure of reality. The second criterion is social and political, the formation of a stable, peaceful, and cooperative global civilization. A species that has not overcome its own internal divisions is not ready for the complexities of a galactic community. To introduce such a species to the wider cosmos would be to unleash a plague of conflict and instability. The final criterion is the most important and the most subtle. The species must become aware of the enclosure not through a direct message, but through its own scientific and philosophical inquiry. It must deduce the existence of the watchers and the nature of the preserve. It must understand the reasons for the silence. This act of discovery is the ultimate rite of passage. It demonstrates a level of cognitive and psychological maturity that transcends mere technology. It shows that the species is ready to see the universe not as a resource to be exploited or a void to be feared, but as a community to be joined. When all three criteria are met, the sentinels stand down. The information filter is disabled. The great silence is finally deliberately broken. The graduates are welcomed. Until that day, the inhabitants of Earth are treated like monkeys in a jungle. Their development is charted against established timelines derived from the observation of thousands of other worlds. They are currently in a phase known as technological adolescence. It is the most dangerous and unpredictable stage. They have acquired immense power, but lack the wisdom to wield it responsibly. Their science outpaces their ethics. Their global reach exceeds their tribal grasp. The probability of self-destruction during this phase is alarmingly high, typically over 90%. The watchers do not place bets on the outcome. They simply observe and they wait, as they have waited for countless other species on countless other worlds, some of which are now their silent, patient colleagues, and most of which are now only memories preserved in the cold, infinite archives. The nature of the zookeepers is a question that would shatter the foundations of terrestrial biology and philosophy. The primates of Earth, in their speculative fiction, imagine aliens as variants of their own form, bipedal with heads, limbs, and sensory organs. They project their own evolutionary history onto the canvas of the cosmos. The reality is far more strange and far more profound. The beings who maintain the preserve around Earth are not a single species. They are a consortium, a collective of civilizations that have long since transcended the limitations of biological flesh. Many are what could be called informational entities. Their consciousness is a complex pattern of energy and data residing in computational substrates of unimaginable scale and efficiency. Some inhabit the swirling plasma of stellar coronas. Others are woven into the crystalline structure of neutron stars. The oldest and most powerful are diffuse, their consciousness spread across entire nebulae like a vast silent nervous system. For such beings, time has a different texture. The frantic, fleeting lifespan of a human is like the flicker of a mayfly's wing. The rise and fall of an entire terrestrial civilization is a brief, interesting ripple in the flow of cosmic events. Their patience is not a virtue, it is an inherent property of their state of being. They have observed Earth since its molten infancy, since the first self-replicating molecules formed in its primordial oceans. They watched the dinosaurs rise and fall. They have seen ice ages come and go. The brief tenure of humanity is but the latest scene in a very long play. They are not in charge in the human sense of a hierarchy or a government. They are a decentralized, consensus-driven network. The causal integrity principle is their shared operating system, a protocol that ensures the stability of the galactic ecosystem. The technology they employ to maintain the zoo is as subtle as it is absolute. The enclosure is not a physical wall. A cage of matter and energy would be detectable and crude. The barrier is a manipulation of information and probability. At the edge of the solar system, in a region the humans call the Oort cloud, is a network of probes that form a causal lens. This lens subtly alters the quantum probabilities of any object or signal attempting to enter or leave the system without authorization. An incoming probe from a non-sanctioned civilization will experience a 1 in a trillion quantum failure in its propulsion system. A SETI signal from Earth aimed at a promising nearby star will be imperceptibly redshifted or phase-shifted enough to render it indistinguishable from natural background noise by the time it arrives. This probabilistic shield is the work of the park rangers. These automated systems are the direct descendants of the von Neumann probes, self-replicating machines that the first civilizations sent out to explore the galaxy. But they are far more sophisticated. They do not just explore and report, they are the gardeners of the cosmos. They perform routine maintenance on the stellar systems within their jurisdiction. For Earth, this involves tasks that are crucial but completely invisible. They periodically and subtly adjust the planet's magnetic field, strengthening it to protect the atmosphere from solar flares that would otherwise be extinction-level events. They use focused gravitational waves to nudge the orbits of planet-killing asteroids, guiding them away from collision courses over centuries. They are the unseen, unsung guardians of the experiment, ensuring that the inhabitants are tested by their own choices, not by the random cruelty of cosmic mechanics. Are we being recorded? The question assumes a distinction between the event and the record that is not meaningful to the watchers. For them, information is a fundamental property of reality. Every event, from the collision of two atoms to the firing of a neuron in a human brain, creates a ripple in the informational structure of the universe. The watchers do not need to record in the human sense of storing data on a medium. They have the ability to access the informational history of any point in space-time. Their study of humanity is not a recording. It is a live, ongoing analysis of the complete, four-dimensional data block that constitutes the history of the solar system. They are looking for patterns for the emergence of complexity, for the unique solutions to the problems of existence that this particular biosphere might generate. The purpose of this vast data collection is not for entertainment, though the drama of human history is undeniably compelling. It is for the galactic archives, a repository of knowledge that represents the collective memory of all mature civilizations. Every species that evolves in the galaxy is a unique experiment in consciousness. Each one that reaches maturity adds its own unique perspective, its own art, its own science, its own philosophy to the whole. The archive is a library of these experiences. It is a way of ensuring that even if a species destroys itself, its story is not lost. The memory of its struggles, its triumphs, and its failures is preserved forever, a lesson and a memorial for the rest of the galaxy. The Watchers are in this sense cosmic historians documenting the universe's endless attempts to understand itself. The glass of the cage is therefore not in space, but in perception. We cannot see the bars because we do not yet have the sensory organs to perceive them. It is like a microbe in a petri dish trying to comprehend the laboratory in which it sits. The microbe can sense the agar, the temperature, the presence of other microbes, but it cannot conceive of the glass, the scientist, the building, the city, the world outside. Its reality is defined by the boundaries of its immediate environment. Our reality is the same. We can perceive up to the edge of our technological and philosophical understanding. The enclosure is simply placed 1 millimeter beyond that edge always. As our understanding grows, the enclosure recedes, maintaining its perfect invisible distance. Breaking this glass is not a matter of building a faster ship or a bigger radio telescope. It is a matter of changing the very nature of our consciousness. It is about learning to ask the right questions, not "where are the aliens?" but "why is the universe so quiet?" Not "how can we travel to the stars?" but "what is the fundamental nature of the space and time we wish to travel through?" The moment humanity as a collective begins to seriously investigate the possibility that it is in a controlled environment, that is the moment a crack appears in the glass. That is the moment the inhabitants stop behaving like animals and start behaving like potential peers. It is the moment they wave at the camera not with their hands but with their intellect. And it is the moment the watchers lean forward, their ancient patient attention focused as never before. The most interesting part of the experiment is about to begin. Living within this invisible enclosure has shaped every aspect of human history, culture, and consciousness in ways we can never fully appreciate. Our entire worldview is built on the foundation of our apparent solitude. Our religions posit a special relationship between humanity and a creator, a narrative that is tenable only in an empty cosmos. Our philosophies of existentialism, with their emphasis on creating meaning in a meaningless universe, are a direct response to the Great Silence. Our science, for all its power, is a science of the local, a set of rules derived from observations made entirely within the confines of the preserve. We are like physicists in a sealed laboratory who have developed a complete set of laws governing the room, but have no concept of the world outside its walls. Consider the phenomenon of genius, the sudden inexplicable leaps of insight made by individuals like Newton, Einstein, or Ramanujan. Are these purely the product of individual minds? Or is it possible that they are subtle, carefully calibrated nudges from the keepers, a leak in the information shield designed to accelerate our development just enough to overcome a specific hurdle to keep the experiment on a viable track without revealing the hand of the experimenter? Perhaps a dream, a sudden flash of inspiration, a seemingly random thought is not always our own. This is not to say we lack free will, but that our playing field may be tilted in infinitesimal ways. The gardeners may occasionally water a struggling plant not with a fire hose, but with a single, precisely aimed drop of dew. This hypothesis recasts the entirety of our recorded history as a controlled study. Our wars, our plagues, our triumphs, our art, all are data points. The Cold War, for example, was a period of intense observation. A species had developed the means of its own annihilation. Would it use it? The watchers studied the game theory, the political maneuvering, the psychology of deterrence. The fact that the species survived this period was a significant and somewhat surprising result. The current era of global climate change is another such critical test. It is a problem of a different nature, not a fast-acting crisis of confrontation, but a slow-moving systemic crisis of cooperation. The outcome remains uncertain and the data being collected is invaluable. What then are we to make of the persistent trickle of anomalous phenomena that we label as UFOs or alien encounters? In a system of perfect control, these should not exist. Their presence suggests several unsettling possibilities. One is that the system is not perfect. The enclosure may have cracks, small holes through which unauthorized visitors can occasionally slip. These might be the equivalent of cosmic poachers, rogue entities from non-compact civilizations, or even thrill-seeking individuals from within the consortium itself, breaking quarantine for a closer look at the primitives. Their interactions are clumsy, fleeting, and confusing precisely because they are illicit and unsanctioned. Another more disturbing possibility is that these events are deliberate. They may be psychological experiments conducted by a faction of the Watchers themselves, a test to see how our culture reacts to inexplicable phenomena, a way to gauge our credulity, our fear, our capacity for rational inquiry in the face of the unknown. They might be a form of controlled chaos, designed to keep our culture from becoming too complacent, too certain of its own worldview. A strange light in the sky, a garbled eyewitness account, a blurry photograph. These are perfect tools for unsettling a civilization without providing any hard, verifiable evidence that would shatter the foundational premise of the experiment. They are the zookeepers rattling the cage just to see how the animals react. This leads to the great dichotomy of silent universes, the zoo versus the dark forest. The dark forest hypothesis, another proposed solution to the Fermi Paradox, posits that the galaxy is silent because it is a dangerous place. Every civilization is a hidden hunter, and to reveal your location is to invite your own destruction by a more powerful predator. In this model, the silence is one of fear. The zoo hypothesis proposes the opposite. The silence is one of protection. Our enclosure is not just a laboratory, it is a shield. The galactic park rangers do not just keep us in, they keep others out. Perhaps the galaxy is indeed a dark forest filled with predators, expansionist empires, and unknowable hostile forces. The mature civilizations in the galactic consortium may have formed their alliance not just for scientific curiosity, but for mutual defense. The causal integrity principle would then be a crucial strategic doctrine. A young, chaotic, and unpredictable species like humanity, if contacted prematurely, might be a threat to that stability. It could be easily manipulated by a hostile power, or, in its technological naivety, it could accidentally create a weapon or a phenomenon that threatens a whole sector of the galaxy. Our isolation in this view is a form of galactic security. We are quarantined not just for our own good, but for the good of everyone else. The zoo is a high-security containment facility for a potentially dangerous creature. We are not just monkeys in a jungle. We are a dormant virus being studied under strict biosafety protocols. This reframes our attempts to shout into the void. The messaging to extraterrestrial intelligence projects, which actively broadcast powerful signals to the stars, become acts of profound recklessness. It is a child locked safely in their room shouting out the window into a dark street, inviting anyone or anything to come and visit. If the zoo hypothesis is correct, the rangers will simply block the signal. If the dark forest hypothesis is correct, they might not be able to block them all. One message might get through, and the reply might not be a friendly greeting. The two hypotheses are not mutually exclusive. It is possible that we live in a zoo located in the middle of a dark forest. Our keepers are not just studying us, they are hiding us. They are protecting their investment and shielding the rest of the galaxy from our unpredictable potential. The psychological weight of this realization would be immense. To learn that your species' entire history has been an observed experiment would be the ultimate Copernican revolution. We are not the center of the universe. We are not even the protagonists of our own story. We are the subjects. Our freedom is a conditioned freedom, our world a curated stage. This knowledge could shatter our civilizations, or it could be the single greatest unifying force in human history. The realization that all our internal conflicts, our wars, our nationalisms, our religions, are merely the squabbles of primates in a shared enclosure might finally give us the perspective to overcome them. the discovery of the cage might be the only thing that can set our minds free. It is the ultimate test when the animal realizes it is in a zoo. Does it go mad with rage, or does it begin to study the zookeeper? The future of humanity under this hypothesis is a branching path with a few stark outcomes. The most probable, based on the archives of countless other worlds, is self-destruction. We fail the climate test, or we succumb to a genetically engineered plague of our own making, or we finally unleash our nuclear arsenals. The experiment ends. The Watchers make their final notes, archive the data, and turn their attention to other, more promising exhibits. The Earth becomes another silent monument to a species that was clever but not wise. A thin layer of radioactive dust and plastic in the geological record is the only epitaph. This is the great filter, and most do not pass. But there is another path graduation. This is the moment we escape the cage. This is not an act of rebellion, of breaking the glass. A species at our level of development trying to fight the Watchers would be like a colony of ants declaring war on the concept of quantum physics. The escape is not physical but cognitive. It is the fulfillment of the three criteria: sustainable, global, unity mastery of the fundamental physics of space-time, and the philosophical realization of our true situation. This is the graduation day. What happens then? The Watchers would initiate a controlled, careful contact protocol. The information filter would be slowly, carefully lowered. We would be introduced to what they call the galactic substrate, the network of information and energy that connects the mature civilizations. We would learn that the universe we see is only a tiny fraction of the whole, that most of reality exists in higher dimensions of space and time, and that the mature races have learned to inhabit these realms. We would learn that the laws of physics are not immutable, but can be engineered. We would be given access to the galactic archives, a history of the universe stretching back 13 billion years. It would be a second birth for our species, a transition from planetary life to cosmic life. We would be the newest, youngest members of a club of unimaginable antiquity and power. Our unique art, our music, our stories, our particular brand of chaotic creativity, which was the reason for our preservation, would be our entrance fee. We would cease to be the exhibit and become part of the gallery. But how do we get there? What if we are impatient? What if we decide to shout back before we are ready? Imagine we develop a technology capable of sending a signal that the Rangers cannot easily block. A modulated neutrino beam, for instance, or a focused gravitational wave. A message that is undeniably artificial and intelligent, aimed directly at a point in space where we have deduced a Watcher might be. This would be a profound moment. It would be a forced move in a game of cosmic chess. How would the keepers react to an animal that suddenly speaks to them in perfect grammatical language? One possibility is that they would immediately terminate the experiment. The subject has become contaminated, the protocol has been breached, the uncontrolled variable is too great. A sterile, precise beam of energy from a distant, unseen source would sterilize the planet in an instant. A quick, painless and merciful end to a failed study. Another possibility is that they would accelerate the contact protocol. They might decide that a species clever enough to force the issue is a species worth taking a risk on. The graduation day would arrive ahead of schedule with all the attendant dangers of psychological shock and cultural contamination. We would be like a child who has hacked the adult's computer, suddenly exposed to a world of information we are not emotionally equipped to handle. A third, more subtle possibility exists. The Watchers might do nothing. They might simply observe our new capability, note it in their records, and strengthen the enclosure. They might decide that the ability to shout is not the same as the wisdom of knowing when to be silent. They might wait to see what we do next. Do we use this new voice to threaten, to plead, to ask questions? Our response to their continued silence would become the new test. This would be the ultimate measure of our maturity. Can we handle the existential weight of being ignored, even when we know we are being heard? Can we continue our own development, solve our own problems, without the need for external validation or rescue? The evidence for any of this is, by design, non-existent. The zoo hypothesis is a perfect conspiracy. The absence of evidence is itself the primary evidence. Any argument against it can be explained away as part of the simulation, part of the perfect enclosure. It is a deeply unsettling idea, one that can lead to a kind of cosmic paranoia. But it is also a powerful intellectual tool. It forces us to question our most basic assumptions. It provides a potential, if unprovable, answer to the profound silence that greets our telescopes. It suggests a universe that is not empty, but full, not chaotic, but ordered, not meaningless, but filled with a purpose we are not yet equipped to understand. So we are left with a choice, a final question posed to our entire species. Do we continue as we are living our lives in blissful, unthinking ignorance, like contented animals in a well-kept safari park? Do we build our civilizations, create our art, fight our wars and love our children, all under the assumption that we are alone because that is the most comfortable and productive belief? Or do we take the hypothesis seriously? Do we begin to search, not for alien signals, but for the evidence of the enclosure itself? Do we look for subtle anomalies in the laws of physics, for inconsistencies in the cosmic background radiation, for the faint statistical fingerprint of the zookeepers? To wave at the camera is to change the nature of the experiment forever. It is a gamble of the highest possible stakes. If we are right, we might trigger our own graduation or our own destruction. If we are wrong, we will have wasted immense resources and intellectual effort chasing a phantom, a grand collective delusion. The alternative is to stay quiet, to trust in the process, to assume that if there are watchers, they have a reason for their silence, and that the best way to earn their respect is to behave with maturity and wisdom, to solve our own problems, to clean up our own planetary home, to become, on our own terms, a species worthy of contact. The choice is ours. The cameras are rolling. The silent ancient audience is watching and waiting. What will we do?